All right, welcome back, everyone. Um, we are going to continue on with the next presentation here. So I'm really excited to welcome here Daisy Magnus-Aryitey. She is the co-executive director of Code the Dream, a nonprofit startup based right here in good old Durham, North Carolina. Or for those of y'all who don't know, Upswing also began as well. And I also found out just recently that we are both actually in American Underground. So somehow, despite the place not being that big, we haven't run into each other yet. But Daisy expanded the organization from a local to a national training program with a focus on tech education and increasing access to economic opportunities. Prior to joining the organization, Daisy worked as a software developer at Duke University. She's a public speaker and sits on the Technical Education Programs Committee at the Emily K Center in Durham. And she was recently featured on the cover of the most recent issue of Durham Magazine. Daisy holds a master's in educational innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship from UNC Chapel Hill and a BA from Rutgers University. I want to thank you all, or thank you so much, Daisy, for joining here and welcome you to the audience here. Thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to hearing your discussion.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I think it's noon for most of y'all. I'm actually in New Orleans attending the JFF conference. And so I'm an hour behind where I usually am. And I've been, fretting about perhaps being an hour late, but I think we're working it out and we're all here on time. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can get into the presentation. So again, thank you all for having me today. I want to share a little bit about my background. As Melvin stated, I have a lot of kind of intersections with education throughout my whole life. And one of my most formative memories actually came from an education setting when I was in first grade. I started first grade about a year and a half after my family immigrated to the United States. I was always a very diligent student, and I remember being in class one day, and the teacher gave us an assignment where we had to cut and paste some words and arrange them according to vowel sounds. And I got my glue sticks and I had my scissors, and I just went to work. And I did the entire assignment, and then I sat back so proudly and looked at my paper. And the little boy sitting next to me looked at my paper and looked at his paper, and he said, "You did it wrong." And I was baffled, and I looked at his paper, and then I looked at the paper of all the other little kids around the table, and I realized that, yes, in fact, I had done something very wrong because my vowel sounds were just not arranged in the same way that theirs were. And I realized in that moment when I was, 6.5 years old, that I was speaking with an accent. And so because I was speaking with an accent, I was saying the words differently. And so I was experiencing the language in a different way. And from that moment, from that time on, I sort of sat back and realized, I can't take things for granted. I can't walk into a situation, even if I feel like I understand what's going on. I really need to sit back and observe and kind of ask deeper questions. So that was a bit of metacognition from my 6-year-old self. And it's really informed my orientation towards new experiences, towards learning and observing, and really having that open mind and that bent towards asking deeper questions, and really not kind of taking for granted any moment or certainly any new environment. And so I invite you, as we kind of dive into this presentation together, to take a similar orientation towards curiosity, towards pushing back, even on the things that you hear on this presentation today, and sort of not taking for granted that anything I say is certainly gospel truth. It's just my experience, and I would love to hear if you have a different experience. So let's let's dive into this presentation together. And I can't see the chat as I'm speaking, and so I hope it's not too informal, but if you have a question, if you have a burning question, I invite you to just come off mute and ask, and so we can all learn together. So over the next, I guess about 25 to 30 minutes, I want to hit these session goals. First, I want to highlight the mission, the model, and outcomes of Code the Dream. Next, I'd like to examine together the current research around constructivism in education and emerging collaborations, or as one of the leaders in the field calls it, group genius. And then at the end, I want to lay out 2 keys to activating group genius in education settings. So kind of how do we activate mastery in a collaborative sense in our education settings. So why, I always like to start with a little bit of why does this all matter? This is not sort of an academic exercise for us at Code the Dream, and certainly not for me. It's not just about theory, but it's really about practice. And so the why has always come back to this picture that I came across about a year ago that's just so striking to me. And it's a picture of this strange vegetable. Does anybody know what this is, or has anybody seen this vegetable before? Any guesses? And if you have a guess, please, I invite you to come off mute and just yell it out.
Somebody guessed a cauliflower.
Close. Yeah, that's a great guess. This is called a Romanesco broccoli, and it's a cousin to a cauliflower, and it's native to the Mediterranean area in Italy. And it's a very, very strange looking fruit. I Google it and take a very close look. It's really, really unusual. What I love about this picture is it's actually a picture of fractals, which is a physics concept. It's a physical picture of fractals. And so fractals, many of you may know, are infinitely complex patterns that are self-similar across different scales. And so what this Romanesco broccoli reminds me is that what exists in the micro is what exists in the macro. And so physicists and theologians and education theorists all agree that what we see in the micro is what we also see in the macro. And writer Adrienne Marie Brown put it so beautifully in this quote. They say, "The same spiral on seagulls can be found in the shape of galaxies. Therefore, we must create patterns that cycle upward." And this is from their book, Emergent Strategies, which is a phenomenal book. So let me read that again. "The same spiral on seagulls can be found in the shape of galaxies. We must create patterns that cycle upward." So one of our goals at Code the Dream is not only to provide excellent training and apprenticeships and connect people from low-income backgrounds to high-paying, high-demand careers in technology, but we really seek to create patterns that will cycle upward to really disrupt the education training systems that exist right now, and to make them more equitable and more accessible, especially to low-income, diverse adults. So I'll take this time to tell you just a little bit about what we do at Code the Dream. We are a training program, and we are an apprenticeship shop as well. And so what we do is we offer free classes in software development. We teach Rails, React, and Node.js to people from low income and diverse backgrounds. Our classes are completely free, and they are completely online. In addition, they're extremely flexible just to accommodate the schedules of working adults. After people complete our classes, we invite them to participate in a year-long apprenticeship, I should say. It's a full-time apprenticeship position working in our development shop. Within our development shop, we work on 12 to 15 different apps and websites for nonprofits and government agencies around the country that are building tools that really accelerate good in this world. And so it's the apprentices that matriculate out of our classes that are able to spend 40 hours a week growing their skills while giving back to their communities by building these digital platforms. Our mission at Code the Dream is to create opportunity that changes lives, build technology that benefits our community, and support the diversity that drives a more just and innovative world. So really our goal is to impact the individual, build our community, impact our community, as well as build the world that we want to see. Particularly as tech grows and influences so much of the world as we know it, we want to make sure that we have diverse voices at the table that are not only reaping the economic benefits of high-paying jobs in technology, but are also impacting how we spend our time in technology, what tools that we build to make sure that technology is not further marginalizing people who already do not have access. So this is a little bit about our community. Yes, we are based here in North Carolina, and we have an office in the American Underground, and we're so proud to be part of that community. Since 2018, we have expanded nationally. And so now we are represented at the latest count in 32 states around the country. And so our student population, last year we served around 260 students went through our program. Currently, we have around 40 to 45 full-time apprentices in our program, as well as a full-time staff of 20 people to help assist and run the programming as well. And so we have a full-time staff of around 65 people right now. And we're also we expect to reach around 300 students this year. In terms of our student population, more than 70% are Black or Latinx, and more than 50% are women. And when you think about the diversity that exists in tech right now, it's really a phenomenal accomplishment that we've been able to maintain this community that is led by women and people of non-binary backgrounds, as well as people of color. Tech is just not that diverse despite all the efforts of large tech companies. And so we're really proud to represent this new community that has not yet been seen, but is certainly growing. Let me go back one. Apologies. So as we built Code the Dream, we were really lucky to be in that American Underground space. And the American Underground is a co-working space for startups that are based in the Triangle in North Carolina. And being in that startup space really influenced the work that we do in this sort of unusual and very specific way. Working with startups invited us to incorporate an entrepreneurial mindset in the work that we do. And so we came to this work knowing that we wanted to build an education platform organization that was really tailored to a specific need and to a specific subset of people. And that meant we couldn't recreate education as we know it. And we could not recreate the same patterns that exist because they haven't served people from certain backgrounds. And so we took that entrepreneurial mindset on and we said, okay, what does it look like then to serve people who are recent immigrants? What does it look like to develop an education organization that really meets the needs of working adults and single parents and people who are justice involved? And so we had this really wonderful challenge to reimagine education and to create a new model. One of the ways that we landed on that was really central to the work into this new model is to incorporate this idea of constructivism. I have a background, as Melvin mentioned, I have a background in education innovation from UNC Chapel Hill. And so I've just really enjoyed diving into this various ideas around education theory and how do people learn and what are the most successful ways to implement systems that really work for diverse learners. One of the education theories that is just very, very key to the way that we run our program is the idea of constructivism. And I've put here a brief definition. Constructivism is an education theory that emphasizes the active role of learners in constructing their understanding of knowledge and the world around them. It suggests that learning is a process, actively building meaning and making sense of new information based on prior knowledge and experiences. Very quickly, we realized that when people come to Code the Dream, and most people are post high school, most people are in their 20s and 30s, some even in their 40s and 50s. Right now, the average age of our student is 28 years old. So they have experience behind them. Perhaps they have some education experience, maybe some high school, maybe some college, maybe they have a degree from their home country, in addition to some life experience behind them. What we don't want is we don't want them to come into this new environment and think they have to discard all of those rich experiences and knowledge in order to start anew and start fresh. We really want to incorporate what they already know and use that to be the foundation as they build upon their experiences. So these are the 4 principles of constructivism, and I'll read them out, and then I'll share a little bit about how we are incorporating these principles in our learning environment. First, it's the idea of active learning. And so project-based learning is really key to helping adults to build knowledge and to retrain for new careers. The next piece is social interaction. That is so key, especially in technology. And I'll go a little bit more into depth in that in a moment. The next principle of constructivism is authentic context and real world application. So making sure that the projects that we build are not removed from what it looks like to be a software developer in the real world. Next, reflection and metacognition. So giving people that time to reflect on what they're learning, reflect on how they're learning, and make adjustments and changes as they need to. And so what that looks like in Code the Dream is we are primarily project-based learning in classes, and certainly in the apprenticeship. People are building projects as they go along through their classes. The social interaction piece is really key. We invite people to participate in a minimum of 2 mentor sessions every week. And the mentor sessions are scheduled at times around the clock, and so people can jump in as their work and family schedules allow. And so what's really interesting about our program is that people don't have to be in a physical location at a certain time. And so it's not anything like, hey, we have class at 2 p.m. and if you can't be there, or if your work schedule doesn't allow, I guess this isn't the program for you. People can come into mentor sessions and fit in where they can work it in their schedule. But those mentor sessions are so key to people's learning, because they are able to go into those sessions and work one-on-one or in small groups with professional software developers, as well as individuals from their cohort who are all working on the same week's project and same week's learning. So they're able to have that near peer interaction as well as the social interaction from professional software developers who can kind of jump on a call and say, okay, this is how I would work through this problem in the real world. Hint, it involves a lot of Googling. And that's wonderful for students to see that, to see, oh, when I'm a full-time professional software developer, this is how, these are the steps that I would go through in order to solve a problem. And that social interaction becomes a key factor in their learning and growth. The next piece is authentic context and real world applications. So one thing that's very different about Code the Dream, or I should say different from the way that people have experienced education in the past, is we don't have quizzes and tests in the same way that people might have experienced in high school or in college. We want to provide people with an authentic context, just like in the real world. When we go to work, we're not quizzed and we're not given tests. What we're given are projects, and we can show how we are working through those projects and what blockers or issues we're coming up against, or what questions we have for the larger team. And so those are the patterns and the processes that we recreate in our classes. So really giving people that authentic context to grow and learn in as they're going through the training program. And then lastly is the reflection and metacognition part. And a lot of that is tied in with the social interaction. And so people have an opportunity to work along somebody who is maybe stuck on a concept and they understand. So they're maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead, and they can reflect on their learning, share what they learned, share how they got past those kind of sticky points. And as they're sharing, as they're reflecting, they're actually learning it a little bit deeper. And I apologize, I can't see the chat so far. So if there are any burning questions, feel free to jump in. So I wanted to give an example of some of the projects that we do and how all these ideas of constructivism are sort of tied in to the everyday work of Code the Dream students and apprentices. So our apprenticeship is a full-time position. It's a full-time salaried position where people can come in, work full-time, 40 hours a week on these Tech for Good projects. As they're working, they are paired with senior developers on our team. Ramiro, as you can see in the blue shirt from our picture, from this picture, he is the CTO and one of the co-founders of Code the Dream, and he works right alongside the students who are working on these Tech for Good projects. So you can imagine what an opportunity and what an opportunity for growth it is for somebody to just work along somebody like Ramiro, who is well-skilled, highly skilled and advanced in the field, and can ask them those questions and kind of observe how they work. One of the projects that we've worked on within our dev shop for a few years now is a tool called Vamos. And Vamos, we built that in collaboration with nonprofits around the country that serve migrant farm workers. And so migrant farm workers are individuals that are really the backbone of our agricultural system in this country. And they are often low-wage workers, but not low skilled, but come from migrant populations and therefore are vulnerable to exploitation. One of the issues that we've seen is these organizations that are serving farm workers, making sure that they have access to medical health, access to just different resources that they need as they travel through these migrant camps, is that a lot of the organizations were using processes, pen and paper, notebooks full of, notes that they've made for each other. And so as they're traveling through the camp, it just becomes a very labor intensive, very arduous process to make sure that they are stopping by at the camps, checking in on those who have indicated that they've needed help. And so what Code the Dream does to digitize a lot of that work. And so the folks that are working on the VAMOS project, a lot of them through the years have come from migrant family backgrounds. And so you can imagine that the lived experience that they have is directly applicable to this tool. And in many ways, even though they are junior developers and they're still learning, they really are the best positioned folks to work on this tool. And it's become a way for them to give back to the community, as well as they're building their development and engineering in general. And so they're able to bring in their experience, their past knowledge, as well as their new technical skills in order to help us build this tool. And then they've used that to go on and launch careers in organizations and companies around the country. So I wanted to talk a little bit, let me just check how we're doing for time. We're okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about this next aspect of emerging collaborations, or a learning theory that I think is just so important and so fascinating. It's the idea of group genius, or emerging collaborations as it's called. And group genius is an education theory that's posited by Dr. Keith Sawyer, who's a professor at UNC Chapel Hill. And he describes group genius as a peak experience, a group performing at its top level of ability. And my goal always is for Code the Dream to reach this group genius. I find that software development, despite sort of the caricatures that we see in the media, software development is a communal activity. There's no such thing as a lone genius in this field. We rise together. And so embedding that idea of group genius within our work not only serves the individual because it makes them a top performer, but it really grows the organization. So Dr. Sawyer describes group genius as this way. What's the magical chemistry that happens when a team improvises in response to every move by their opponents without saying a word and wins the game? The answer can't be found in the skill or the creativity of one player. It's the entire group that makes it happen. And so we're trying to prepare participants to be elite performers in the field. And we do that by building this idea of group flow and group genius. And group genius is interesting because it's something that we've all experienced at one time or another, right? Maybe it is we're on a field, or we're on a basketball court, and we're playing a physical game. But it could also be like we're in a church choir and we hit that note and it's suddenly like heaven, right? Or maybe we're on a group text and the jokes and the gifts are flying fast and furious. And it's this idea that we've like hit a level of just kind of genius and flow that would not happen with one individual. And it's not just one individual that's like helping us reach that point. It's something about the group cohesion, and the entire group is working together to make it happen. And so we are trying in our organization to reach that group genius, to make sure that all of us are rising together. And so two keys that Dr. Sawyer puts forth to how we activate group genius in education settings. We rethink structures and we rethink power. Now, when most of us experience education in grade school, in high school, and college, is that there is a teacher who is all-knowing. They are the master of this domain of knowledge. And as students, we sit back and we take it all in. at Code the Dream, we really want to rethink that structure, knowing that many of our students are, as I said, in their 20s and 30s. Maybe some of them have had careers in their home country. These are certainly adults that have their own experiences that are important and rich and can contribute to our entire group genius. So we want to make sure that we are rethinking power in our learning environments, and that we're rethinking our structures and how we approach education as a whole. So a couple keys that we use to rethink structure and power is we ask these questions. How can we increase the frequency of unstructured communication? And so how do we increase communication between the learners and the educators, and between the learners themselves? So one way we increase the frequency of unstructured communication is by recreating this sort of water cooler moments that are very difficult to happen, very difficult because they don't happen as naturally in sort of a digital world. So one tool we use a lot and we love it, we use Slack at work. I know some organizations use Teams, but it's not just that we use these platforms, it's how we use them. So in addition to having channels that are designated for project work, we also have channels that are designated for sharing your lives and pictures of your pets, and recipes that you're trying out, and exercises that you're doing. So letting people post about their real lives outside of work, and then letting other people chime in with like, oh, that recipe looks delicious, or oh, check out my pet, or I just went on this adventure. And so really allowing people to have that unstructured communication really kind of levels the playing field and makes the organization more flat and less hierarchical. And having a flat organization is really crucial to experiencing that group genius. The next piece is we want to identify what tacit knowledge do we possess and how do we make it explicit. And this is really about inclusion. And so making sure that if there are processes or systems that we use, for example, in software development, we have, or on our tech team, we have very specific ways that we want new developers to write their code, to ask for help to push their code. And what's important and incumbent on us is that we make those processes explicit. It can't just be like, oh, they'll figure it out. We want to make people aware of why we're doing things the way we're doing them, and then invite them into that process. And so we don't want to keep any secrets, and we want to always think about what am I taking for granted right now? What am I assuming that other people know? And how do we make that knowledge explicit so that everybody can be included and everybody can feel a deep sense of belonging? And then lastly, how are we granting autonomy? When we give people autonomy, we give them power over their own learning and ultimately power over their own trajectory. And so a little bit of that is done by how we do our scheduling. Having a more flexible schedule does give people autonomy and ability to participate and engage in a much deeper way. So, I mean, Code the Dream, we've been building it as it is right now since 2017, and it's been such a journey. It's been such an honor to see over 90% of folks who leave our apprenticeship leave with a job in hand. The average starting salary is now $85,000 a year, and that is just to start. One idea that we've really been circling around lately, and it's really been exciting us, is that we're giving people access to not only high-paying, in-demand jobs that will provide them stability, economic stability for their family, and a chance to build generational wealth. In addition to that, we're giving people freedom over their schedules. Many of the folks who come through Code the Dream are working, are unemployed or working several low wage work in order to make ends meet. I know that once you give people a chance to have those high paying tech careers, suddenly they're working 40 hours a week and they have their weekends free. And so that gives them the flexibility to then join the PTA or coach their kids' team or run for a volunteer position in their local office. And suddenly we have people who are more engaged deeply in their communities and their cities, and they're changing the city because suddenly they have the access to that high paying job that is opening opportunities in many, many other fields as well. And so that is our mission, and at Code the Dream is we want to provide people not only with bread to meet their everyday needs, but roses as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I would love to hear from you all what questions you have for me. Thank you.
Wow, Daisy, that was such an amazing presentation. I was taking notes. Elena, I was talking to Elena offline, and we're screenshotting each one of these different pieces because there was just so much good insight and information into all of this. I had a couple of questions that I wanted to start with. Oh, and by the way, I didn't want to interrupt your flow. It was such a good flow, but I don't think the audience could go off of mute. So we were just going to allow them to to do the chat Q&A piece. And then we were just going to allow those questions to happen at the end. But I had a couple questions I just wanted to start with. First and foremost, I knew that Code the Dream had a huge emphasis on trying to bring in more female coders, trying to bring in more coders of color. What really surprised me was the number of people you had who were of that non-traditional age. And that's especially surprising because, a lot of times, here at Upswing, we certainly hear that the older students are sometimes more reticent to jump into technology. We'll try and find ways to try and make it as easy as possible for them to initially engage. So how have you been able to so successfully crack that nut and get people of all ages to decide, hey, you know what, I want to shift my career and find out how to be part of this, burgeoning industry?
Well, I find the students that come to Code the Dream are very practically minded, and they're pragmatic in their decision. They've done the research and they say, okay, this is where the opportunity lies. It's in technology. It's in technical careers going forward. And so this is the thing that I want to jump into. That was certainly my own experience. I was a stay-at-home mom for several years, and I pulled out a newspaper and I said, okay, where are the jobs if I'm going to go back to work? I'm certainly, as an older person, I don't feel the need to sort of chase my passion like I did when I was 18. I was like, okay, I need to make money. I need to save for retirement. I need to save to send my kids to school. And so where does the opportunity lie? And I think once you have that sort of mindset, folks in our program are willing to hustle to make it happen. It's not always natural. We did not grow up on screens like this new generation. So It takes a bit of extra work, but folks are determined and they are courageous.
That's so amazing. That's so amazing. There are a couple of people in the audience. Shanoe Smith, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, said, I love that last part, the eventual impact on the community at large. Amy Chan said, Code the Dream, what a great program. I'd love to be trained to code and then be part of the team. Is this possible? I'll let you jump in there.
Well, we have open applications coming up at the end of the month. And so if you're interested, I invite you to fill out an application so you can learn more about our program.
So great. Anna Rue says, this was an insightful presentation. I'm curious about Daisy's perspective about the new advent of AI and how it might affect tech and communities, either positively or negatively. And I know this is a really key question. I've heard people, obviously there's a lot of guesswork happening. I've heard some people say that it'll democratize things a little bit because, it makes it easier for people to, get help with some of the places where they're stuck. I've heard others say that, the potential for some of these AI tools might make it where some of the more entry level positions could potentially go away within coding, and that might make it harder and increase that gap. So, just to add a little bit more color there, what are some of your perspectives on some of these things that are taking place?
Yeah, and I hate to disappoint. So I think my idea around AI is I want people to have exposure to it. I think it's really, really important that we're all learning to use Chat GPT, that we're all exploring different tools that come out, that we're all playing with it, that we're all getting our children to go on. We cannot ignore sort of the rise of AI. In terms of the sort of immediate implications, what I've seen in the past is that technology, even before it starts to impact our lives and sort of the economic forecast or jobs, I should say jobs forecast, what it does is it creates a gap between those who are making money off of AI and then those who are left behind. And so in the short term, I think it's really, really important to make sure that Black people, that people of color, that women are getting into technology careers where they have access to those jobs in AI. Because if there's an explosion of wealth that comes from that, it's really key that we make sure that women are experiencing the benefits, the economic benefits of that Black people are experiencing the economic benefits of that, and that we don't have a wealth gap that is further accelerated because some people have exposure to AI, whereas other people don't.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I love how you all are approaching making technology so accessible to all these different communities. In particular, I liked your approach of constructivism. It reminded me of when I was doing consulting work for an NGO that was based in South Africa, and one of the things that we were trying to do was engage students with finance and things like that by allowing them to start their own businesses. And that was what we found, was that you didn't even have to, force students at that point in time to go to class. They were doing it on their own, right? When they began to realize that it was going to allow them to, generate their own, revenue and expenses and all those types of things, all of a sudden they wanted to learn more and do more. And so I love how you all are incorporating things like constructivism into that approach, and making it just more practical and accessible, and less on the theoretical side for your students as well.
We want people to walk into jobs on day one and feel not only ready, but over prepared. We want them to use the same exact tools in our training program that they would use at a job at IBM. And so we are making sure that we are using industry standards, we're using industry-wide tools so that people are engaged on another level and they're practicing in a real kind of and deep way, so that they have that confidence when they step in. They're like, oh, I've done this before. Like this,
Yeah.
This is nothing. I got this.
I love that. I see that Laura Payne had a question. She said, how does your organization work with assisting undocumented students attain workforce entry? Is that something that it's in the chat, not in the Q&A, but yeah, I just wanted to see if that was something that you all have been able to provide any kind of support with.
Well, with undocumented students, because we're an apprenticeship, salaried apprenticeship position, we can't bring on undocumented students, but we our training is definitely open to them, and so we try to serve them in different ways. Is this, oh, this is an anonymous attendee. I mean, I'd love to, kind of dive more into your question offline if you're open to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to certainly reach out to Daisy. We can provide her contact information there as well. And then I see that Anna Rue said, very interesting and important, thank you. It'll be interesting to see how institutions and systems will promote equity in AI. So this is in response to what you were talking earlier about just the AI approach. I had a question as well for you just about getting back to the practical nature that you were sharing earlier. I would love to hear any kind of advice you might have for, we have a lot of, community colleges, a lot of HBCUs in the audience today. I would love to just hear your advice for how they can help bring out some of the kind of, practicalness, for lack of a better word, that they can kind of push their students to want to be able to do something like Code the Dream, to be able to feel like that's an opportunity that's open to them. Is there something that you would say that if institutions maybe did more of that fit what you were looking for, that might be able to help open those doors a little bit more for, adult learners and student parents and non-traditional students?
Yeah, I think exposure is key. I think giving people an opportunity to build something as they're learning is really important now, as employers are looking for not only the degree or the certification, but what proof can you give me that you can do what you say. And so giving people a chance to build projects, to volunteer as part of different community organizations, and to build up real world skills, I think is really important in terms of opening those opportunities for them and those kind of first work opportunities, but then also building their confidence and their networks in the process, I think is very, very important. And so if we want to take like a holistic view of building the learner and recreating all of the sort of professional and social implications of a 4-year kind of unspoken sort of tangential benefits of a 4-year university. It's not only learning the skills and getting the credentials, but it's also building a portfolio, building a professional network, building a social network, and all of those pieces together will set somebody up for success, not only in the short term, but also in have that long-term career trajectory growth as well. And so I think it's good if organizations like Code the Dream are partnering with HBCUs to say, okay, what piece can you give and what piece can we give in order to make that Black and Brown learners are walking away from an educational institution having all those 5 pieces in place. So if it's Code the Dream that can provide that portfolio, real world work piece, or maybe even the professional social capital piece where they're connecting with companies and software developers and COOs and CTOs, if that's a piece that we can give, awesome. And the HBCUs provide that degree piece, that's fantastic, because ultimately we want to create a world where Black and Brown learners are stepping into STEM fields, not only to step out in 2 years because they're just overwhelmed by different, discriminations and racisms and microaggressions. We want to set people up to get those entry-level jobs, to start there, to grow in their careers, become directors and VPs, and open the doors for the next generation. And that's how we shift power.
Couldn't say it better myself. This is such a great organization. I thank you so much for just sharing what you're doing, what you have already done. It's just so great, and great to know that we're just within steps of each other as well. So thank you so much, Daisy, for your time, for stepping away from the conference to to provide your presentation. It's been really great having you today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you, everybody.
Absolutely. So with that, everyone, we are going to take our lunch break. It'll be a 30-minute lunch break. And so we will come back at 1:15 Eastern. During this time period, we don't want you to feel alone. So we will, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be actually sharing a video from Dr. Adrian Hagerbrook, his recent TED Talk on 3 ways to reduce the barriers to education. And then we'll come back this afternoon with Mentor Collective, sharing on creating a sense of belonging through mentorship, followed by facilitating and supporting college readiness development for post-pandemic students. So we will see everyone back at 1:15 Eastern. Thank you all, everyone, and see you in a bit.